As soon as we got into the storm, we knew we were committed. I was concerned. I was nervous. We were at 1,500 feet in a Category 4 storm, and that was not protocol. You're not supposed to be in a major hurricane of that intensity at that low an altitude. You risk hitting a downdraft that can carry you uncontrolled down into the ocean.
Welcome to Forum Beyond the Pages, a podcast that tells the stories behind the stories of Florida Humanities award-winning magazine. I'm Andrew Quintana. It's all about great storytelling this season as we speak with some of the Florida Book Award winners featured in our summer 2024 issue of Forum. This week, meteorologist Jeff Masters on his article, Flight into Fury. In 1989, former hurricane hunter Jeff Masters hopped on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's P-3 Orion aircraft for an unforgettable mission. He, along with several colleagues, were tasked with gathering data from the rapidly intensifying Hurricane Hugo. However, the only way to get any information out was to go in. As Masters recalls, it was a flight he almost didn't return from. Can I just say I love the unique passion meteorologists have for their field? When I worked in television, I always found it kind of charming how excited the Mets would get when they were talking about the weather. I'm assuming the same goes for you. Where does that spark come from?
Gosh, I mean, growing up, I was always interested in earth science. I just didn't know which branch of earth science I was going to do, whether it was going to be geology or maybe meteorology. And I decided that, well, geology moves on timescales too slow and meteorology is always changing. So hey, that excitement of always seeing something new has always been with me, and it's really driven my passion for pursuing meteorology as a career.
How did you get into meteorology? I'm assuming you didn't jump straight onto a plane and become a hurricane hunter.
I got a bachelor's degree in meteorology at the University of Michigan, and I went on to get my master's degree in air pollution science because I was concerned with the environmental challenges that we have in our modern society with, dumping too many waste products in the atmosphere. Back when I was first doing research, it was acid rain. That was back in the 1970s and 80s. And then, of course, since then, we've got climate change as the main concern. And so after I got my master's degree, I decided, well, I wanted to go off in the field and do some field work. And the hurricane hunters had a job opening. And this was back in 1986, 87. And the cool thing about this job is that I'd fly on the NOAA weather research aircraft that studied not just hurricanes, but all sorts of intense weather extremes. I mean, in the winter, we'd go up and fly winter storms in Alaska and Norway. The summer, of course, was doing hurricane research. In the spring, I did some tornado projects, and I got to meet, the world's most eminent scientists in all of these branches of meteorology. So it was really a dream job.
So you were basically traveling around the world just learning about different weather events, it sounds like. That's a story itself right there. Can you tell me about that lifestyle, that career you had?
You end up deploying for a period of weeks or often months, usually months, sometimes 2 or 3 months, off to some remote place where you'd set up a base, and the meteorologists who were designing the project would be there and calling the shots, and then you would fly usually anywhere between 10 or 12 missions on the NOAA P-3 aircraft studying this weather phenomena. And these missions were typically 8, 9, 10 hours long, so it's a long day. And you're always at the mercy of the weather as far as your schedule goes. I mean, if the storms don't show up, sometimes you got to go home and then go back later and resume the project. You just have to accept that as part of the deal.
Your story in Forum focuses on the moment you and a crew flew into Hurricane Hugo to collect storm data in 1989. Before we get into the actual flight and the insane story behind it, what were you looking for in that storm?
So when the hurricane hunters fly into a hurricane, there's two purposes. One is to provide data on the actual location and intensity of the storm for the National Hurricane Center to be used in their watches and warnings they put out. And the other is for research. The Hurricane Research Division of NOAA conducts research missions where you try and study a storm's particular characteristics, usually with two aircraft, which is what we did in this Hurricane Hugo story. And the two aircraft used, state-of-the-art research tools. We've got Doppler radars on board. We drop little probes out the bottom of the aircraft to take data as they fall through the atmosphere. And it turned out that this particular mission was a research-oriented mission. We were there to try and understand how the hurricane interacts with the ocean below. And naturally, if you want to understand that interaction, you want to fly close to the ocean. So the idea was to fly at the lowest safe altitude possible to collect the data down near the surface and figure out, just what was going on with all that sea spray that was kicked up in the air, maybe how much, was that cooling the atmosphere, how much heat was coming up off the ocean to help supply the hurricane with energy. All these questions were very important to answer in a hurricane intensification scenario. And we were feeling very fortunate that we had a dream hurricane, one that was rapidly intensifying, and we had both aircraft out there. And boy, gosh, we were determined to understand how that process was proceeding to happen, as far as what is the ocean doing to promote this intensification.
It's funny saying dreams storm when it's a catastrophic hurricane. But as you mentioned, you guys had some knowledge before you got on this flight, and you had some knowledge of what you were heading toward. The consensus in the story that you said was it was a Category 3 storm before you guys got any data. Could you tell me, like, the moment you realized this is going to be a little different?
If you're the first hurricane hunter plane in a storm, you really don't know what to expect. And that was the case with us. This hurricane was coming off of Africa, and it had just gotten in reach of the islands of the Lesser Antilles for us to go out there and investigate it. Now, you've got satellite estimates that can give you a broad idea of what the storm is, but until you actually get there and fly into the thing, you're not certain how good those satellite estimates are. And back in the 1980s, that was particularly the case because the satellites weren't as good then. And in fact, we had only one compared to the two that we have now that do the routine measurements of hurricanes coming off of Africa. So we got up there in the air, and one of the tools that we can use to figure out, okay, are we really getting into a Category 3, is our radar. We have 3 onboard radars. But the most important of these radars actually conked out right when we got in the air, so we were blind to start off with. So finally, as we orbited the storm for the outskirts of the storm for almost an hour trying to fix the radar, we did get it fixed, and then at that point we went plunging right in the storm without a whole lot of time to look at that radar and really digest what it was saying. So if we had that extra time, then we might have looked at that radar and said, things are looking a little fishy here. Maybe this is not just a Category 3, maybe it's a stronger storm. So we didn't end up taking that clue, and it took us actually going into the eye wall of the storm, which is the most intense part, that ring of intense thunderstorms that surrounds the calm eye. When we hit that eye wall and the winds immediately jumped to Category 4 strength, then we knew we had bitten off more than we could chew, and we really should not be in that storm at the low altitude we had selected, which was 1,500 feet. As soon as we got into the storm, we knew we were committed. And you've got to fly at the same altitude you're at. Once you're in that extreme turbulence of the eye wall, you can't really do much maneuvering. You just gut it out and go through to the calm eye. And we knew we had about a 2-minute ride ahead of us. It took that long to get through the eye wall to get to the calm eye. And I was concerned. I was nervous. We were at 1,500 feet in a Category 4 storm, and that was not protocol. You're not supposed to be in a major hurricane of that intensity at that low an altitude. You risk hitting a downdraft that can carry you uncontrolled down into the ocean. Now, we were immediately hitting updrafts and downdrafts that were elevating us several hundred feet, both up and down. And that was concerning because, like I said, you hit a bad downdraft and you're in the ocean, and there's not much you can do once you're committed. Once you're in that eye wall, you just got to go and get through to the calm eye.
After you successfully navigated the storm and lived to tell the tale, you mentioned that you made some interesting discoveries. Can you tell me what you captured in that storm?
So in that 2-minute period when we were plowing through the eye wall, we were hitting some of the strongest updrafts and downdrafts ever recorded in a hurricane. I mean, normally Hurricane Hunter aircraft don't fly at such low altitude to document those. So yeah, we had the honor of documenting some really intense vertical motions that were rarely seen. So that was of great interest, of course, to the scientists, all those updrafts and downdrafts. Right as we were getting towards the calm eye, and the outside started brightening up, right at the moment when I started thinking that, oh, yeah, we made it. I mean, at that point, the winds were Category 5. I thought we punched a Category 5 hurricane at 1,500 feet and made it. But no, what happened is we hit something that we theorized could exist, but nobody had ever documented. And that was a tornado-scale vortex that was embedded in the eye wall. So not only did you have the winds of a hurricane that were blowing you about, but you had a smaller circulation embedded right within the hurricane that was providing a lot more wind. And that's what had the 5.7 Gs of acceleration in it. Just an incredible, we had a 40 mile per hour updraft followed by about a 25 mile per hour downdraft, followed by a 20 mile per hour updraft in the space of 7 seconds. And what was happening is we were flying through this kind of an eye of a tornado scale vortex in those 7 seconds. And the plane was, of course, bucking up and down because the nose is in a downdraft, the tail's in an updraft, and at the same time the winds are blowing Category 5 strength, almost 200 miles per hour. So the plane's doing this kind of corkscrew motion. That was a tornado scale vortex. Had never been observed in any detail before, that kind of thing. And we now know that those structures are common in intense hurricanes. And they are the things that do a lot of the damage that you see when a hurricane makes landfall, at least an intense hurricane, Category 3 or stronger. It's those little, we call them mesovortices, embedded in the eye wall. And so that was really an important finding that, we made the sacrifice to find, because we now understand a lot better about how hurricanes do their damage.
Fast forward 35 years later, and we're in the midst of what is expected to be a historically active hurricane season. How has our understanding of these storms changed since you began studying them?
We've really made some huge strides in understanding how hurricanes work and predicting where they're going to go and how fast they're going to intensify. I mean, the track forecasts for a hurricane are more than twice as good as they were 20, 25 years ago. So we've made a huge advance in that. And the number of platforms we have to observe hurricanes, both satellite and then actually on board the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, have improved as well. So it really is, enriching to see now. I mean, we have so many tools now to observe hurricanes that we didn't have back in the 1980s when I was flying. It's just been really great to see the science advance, to see all these great new techniques, more powerful computers with better models. Some of these computer models we're running now are accurate enough to resolve individual thunderstorms. So we're really getting to the point where we can resolve inside the eye of a hurricane what's going on. We can actually see cases where we've observed in the past where a hurricane will form concentric eye walls, where you've got an eye wall surrounded by another eye wall, 2 rings right next to each other. How does that happen? Well, we've got the models now that can give you an idea of what's going on there. So really exciting to see how the science has progressed. The fact that we're still progressing is great, but we need to get better. We're not very good yet at rapid intensification forecasts, which are the most important ones to get right.
Whenever the next hurricane makes its way to our coast, will you be thinking about the other brave souls that are heading into the storm?
Always, always. There are a number of websites where you can track the hurricane hunters in the air and, follow their data they're sending back. And I always cringe when I see that report, extreme turbulence encountered in Eyewall. I know exactly what they went through. And there's been a couple flights where they've actually had to abort and go back to base because the turbulence was too extreme. So I'm always a little bit of a nervous Nelly when they go in there in one of those category 5s and, cross fingers. We hope we never lose one. I have high hopes that it's never going to happen.
That was Jeff Masters on his article, Flight into Fury. Forum, Beyond the Pages, is produced by Florida Humanities. Our music was created by Tampa Bay area musician JJ Padishall. You can follow him on Instagram at JJ Padishall Music. Want to get the latest issue of Forum delivered to your door 3 times a year? Become a Florida Humanities member by visiting floridahumanities.org/membership. Until next time.